At some point, I'm gonna have to do this on the regular because I need to get my ass in gear if this is gonna become more than just a thing I do on the side. Anyway, welcome to anybody watching. This is Rowan. Welcome to the library. And I wanted to get this in before Tuesday, and it is technically before Tuesday where I'm at, so let's get this movie review stream underway. I did manage to actually see some movies this time, and I'm going to talk about basically what's been on. Oh, hey, Rob. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about what's been on some of the newer releases from HBO Max, Warner Brothers, that sort of thing, because I haven't been able to go out to theaters in a hot second. So let's head on over to the theater room. And let's switch out the posters. Get our first topic underway. And that is the latest from Clint Eastwood. Cry Macho. I actually hadn't heard about... This is the newest release. This is the one I watched when it came out on Friday on HBO Max. And I gotta say, not Clint Eastwood's best. He seems to have been kind of on a downturn, directorial in terms of a director since, it just came out on HBO Max and in theaters. Basically, the premise is taken from a 1970s decade at least, novel, the same name, which has a aging cowboy rancher get hired to pick up the son of his employer, his most recent employer, from his mother down in Mexico and bring him back. And this was back in, the 70s when that was less of an issue and less of a fervent issue and a bigger deal, crossing the border and bringing somebody back. Now it's a much bigger deal. But the idea is that this aging cowboy goes to find this teenage boy and bring him back to his father, while running into some issues across the border in Mexico. And at one point, it's the whole and the title comes from the boy having a pet fighting rooster named Macho. And you wouldn't get that from the movie because the rooster barely plays any part of it other than to be, a cutaway gag to like the rooster crowing or something like that. Or sometimes the rooster will actually get into a fight when the boy's in danger. But in terms of the movie itself, can't speak on the book. For the movie, it's essentially a lesser version of Gran Torino, but done as like somewhat of a Western. Like if Gran Torino was more of a Western and less of an urban story, this is a lesser version of that same thing, where it's the old grizzled retiree, trying to instill wisdom in this young kid. And honestly, this did not... I don't think this worked at all. I think the thing is, since Gran Torino, Eastwood's directing hasn't been all that good. Like Jersey Boys wasn't the best it could be, given the stage show is actually fairly phenomenal. The fact that he made it so bland is actually kind of sad. But that story about the guy who was accused of trying to bomb the Atlanta Olympics, that whole movie, that was kind of just okay. Most of what he's done since Gran Torino has just been okay. And I think this is probably the worst he's done. Not to say that it's like outwardly bad, but more so that it's bland and it doesn't really warrant watching. Let me see something. Chat box should be on top of. Yeah, for some reason. Okay, good. For some reason, it's not showing up on Streamlabs end of there. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, this, like I said, so much of this story's beats, exactly, are basically the same things he did in Gran Torino, but not as good. Like the relationship that he built up with the kid in Gran Torino was more natural, had more going for it. There was more of a reason there. Here, he and the kid don't really have any, like, they don't really build any kind of bond. They're just kind of there. And there's even a point where Eastwood has a romantic subplot, and that doesn't really go anywhere. It's just kind of there. Honestly, it feels more like an obligation. And not to say that Eastwood should stop directing, but I feel like, considering this movie has been trying to be adapted for over a decade, like the last time they were trying to adapt this movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger was getting in trouble for boinking his nanny. And that's how long they've been wanting to do this. And I mean, the book came out in the 70s, so they probably have been wanting to do it even longer. And then now it's finally out, and it's like, why even bother? What was the point? Because, I mean, a lot of the elements of the story from the time probably have aged out and don't really matter anymore. And there were probably even bigger issues. I mean, that's the thing here, is that this has a lot of the same issues with it that Rambo Last Blood had, where it's this grizzled old white dude, white action hero going down to face off against essentially the Mexican cartel, although it's not as outrageous as Rambo was. Here he only faces off against gangsters for like a couple of in a couple of scenes, and the rest of the time it's them trying to get back across the border. And yet I didn't get anything from this movie. It was such a nothing. It was so bland and lifeless, and Eastwood is usually better than that. And which is why I'm wondering, did he have any real passion for this? Did he really care? Is it just that he is so much older now that maybe he's better off not directing per se, but like being that kind of person that he's been playing in Gran Torino and in this movie, where he is more of a mentor. Like, he doesn't have to make movies anymore, and the more movies he makes, the more I question, does he even want to himself? And if he does, then maybe his talent is waning. I mean, it happens. Not every director has slumps, and sadly, I don't think, unless he can come up with something more along the lines of a Gran Torino or an Unforgiven, something that breaks him out of this slump, then he's probably gonna just fade away into Hollywood history, sadly. Yeah, it really does feel like a filler. It feels like a filler movie, something you plop into the schedule to fill time, and something you would watch on like a Saturday afternoon on TV. Yeah, I mean, retirement's not too bad. I mean, that's the thing. He doesn't even have to retire per se. He can still act in things. He can still maybe direct like short films or something like that. He doesn't have to direct feature-length films anymore. He can be a mentor figure. He can start like, he can offer to, mentor young directors on the rise or something like that. Offer his do that sort of thing. But yeah, for this, I honestly don't really have much else to say. I feel like, let me pull up my notes real quick, see if there's anything else I missed. Based on the novel, Gran Torino, and I should mention, besides Eastwood, the kid actor in this is not very good. I mean, he may not have gotten any good direction, but from what I got, he was he may as well have just been a kid they pulled off the street. And, like, they even have Dwight Yoakam, who is, I believe, a country singer. Yeah, I think he's an old country singer from back in, like, the 70s and 80s and whatnot. And he's the dad that Clint Eastwood's trying to get this kid to. And yet, Dwight Yoakam only appears at the beginning and then never again for the rest of the movie. He's basically a glorified cameo. And he's fine. Like, Dwight Yoakam's not a bad actor, and he plays the part fairly well. But at the same point, like, why bother? Once again, you get Dwight Yoakam, who's a fairly solid actor, playing this role of trying to recruit Clint Eastwood. And Clint Eastwood, on screen, it feels like he feels the same that he does behind the camera to me, where he's just kind of obligated to do this thing and that he's past his prime. And whereas Gran Torino took that mentality and built a more compelling story around it, a story about how this retiree isn't completely past his prime and that he does have things to offer to younger generations. He's just, dealing with the baggage that he's had from all his years of living. And here, none of that is there. It's just angry old man goes to find a kid. They have some talks, they have some dialogue, and then eventually it's them heading back to the border. And then even the romantic subplot, you don't really feel any chemistry. There's really no point to it. Like, Clint Eastwood doesn't feel like he loves this woman, and the woman just feels like, I'm doing this for the paycheck, so as soon as this is over, then we can move on with our lives. And just everything about this feels like an obligation. Like, okay, let's just placate Grandpa. Let him make his little movie, and then we can do actual movie making. And I feel that's a shame, because Eastwood is not a bad director, but given his recent output, he's definitely in a bad slump. And I'm hoping that he can if nothing else, I don't want to say he should stop, because that's the only way he's not going to make a good movie is if he just stops. I would rather him keep trying and at least, hopefully one of them will be good. Otherwise, I don't know. But yeah, like I mentioned, he could easily be a mentor figure to up-and-coming directors in Hollywood. Offer his services to, like, a mentorship program to UCLA or something like that. Or not even UCLA, not even California, not even Hollywood, California, or anything like that. Maybe do something outside of the industry, make it more independent. I don't know. He has options out there. He doesn't have to direct boring-ass movies if he doesn't want to, but I don't know. This feels like something you would watch with your grandpa on a Saturday afternoon on network TV or something like that. I don't know. This is the kind of stuff that would pop on after the cartoons were done, and then right after that were the Sam Raimi produced shows like Xena and Hercules and all them, and then after those were the network affiliated showings of random old movies that they had the licenses to. And I feel like this is one of those. This is something that's just like that exists to be watched in syndication or something like that. Something you have on when there's nothing else on. I don't see people clamoring for this movie, and if they do, good for them. It's just not the kind of thing that I really want out of Eastwood or even out of films. So yeah, that was Cry Macho. And we're going to keep this, basically this whole stream is me reviewing the stuff that I had missed from HBO Max that I hadn't covered already. So next up was something from last month on HBO Max and from Warner Brothers. And that is a little sci-fi movie called Reminiscence. And let me fix that again. At some point I'm just going to prepare these images so that they're just ready to be placed. At some point, at some point, I'm gonna run a professional operation, one of these days. But Reminiscence is a sci-fi noir story, and the premise is, I forget how many years in the future it is, but the idea is that in the not too distant future, let me see, doesn't say what year though in these summaries. Just the near future, no date is given, but in the not too distant future, climate change has irreparably damaged the planet, and coastal cities are now flooded to the point where Miami is only inhabitable from like 5 stories and up. And 5 stories, if that, it's probably higher. And like whole swaths of Miami are just underwater. And then the only way to have things, it's basically like Miami becomes Venice, and everything above a certain point in the water, is where you live. So like you take a 10-story building, and everything from 5 stories and up is livable. And then the rest of it is held back by giant water walls. And yeah, it doesn't hold any punches. The one thing I will give Reminiscence is that it does not hold back when it comes to. I'm gonna fix that for next stream. I have to make a note of that. I'd rather the chat box not fade out like that. I'd rather just keep it on screen like that if possible. But I think that's something I have to do in like stream elements or something. In any case, during this time period, the wealthy have become land barons, essentially. They hoard the dry land and then rent it out to people and at exorbitant prices. And so there's the undercurrent that people are sick of living in, this drenched squalor that they've been stuck in because the rich, these land barons are hoarding all of the dry land that's left. And set during this, in this setting, there is a guy who is an ex-Navy sailor. I forget what he did in the Navy. He served, because they also mention that there's another thing that climate change scientists have been warning about, a war over water. And he fought for the US government during that war for water. And I think he was like fighting to protect access to clean water or something like that. They don't go into too much detail. Suffice to say that there was an intense war that had happened recently that there are ex-sailors, ex-Navy personnel that are getting out of it, that are trying to make a living throughout the film. Some of them have become homeless. Some of them are working. Some of them are working as contract, like a security for these land barons and for various for various criminals, and our main character Nick, played by Hugh Jackman, is essentially, how do I describe it? He puts you in the Matrix tube or in those little tubs from Minority Report, and he lets you relive memories. The whole idea is that nostalgia in and of itself, the actual act of nostalgia and reminiscing about your past memories, is itself a business that has become monetizable, and that he provides by using a technology that digs through your memories, allows you to relive them and to also project them for others to see. It's used as it started off as a nod to how so much technology comes it comes through defense. It started off as an enhanced interrogation technique, a torture device, or a means to dig into somebody's memories against their will, but has since become something that you can do
recreationally. Funny enough, you mentioned that. Actually, the inciting incident for this, because we're introduced to some of the clients that Nick has, and he has a friend of his from the Navy as well named Watts, and the inciting incident is the femme fatale played by Rebecca Ferguson walks in and asks for help finding her car keys. So that is it's not something they tend to do. They're usually more in the business of allowing somebody to relive memories of their old dog or a lost loved one, or maybe the early days of their child, holding their baby child again, things like that. But this woman comes in and asks for help finding her keys, and by going through these memories, eventually Nick is enchanted by her because it turns out she's a lounge singer and has been singing this song that his dad used to sing to him when he was a kid, and it's something that clicks with him, and it's something like this fated encounter, except it isn't, and that's where the noir elements start coming in. And that's the one thing I will say is that it leans into the noir methodology, the noir trope of the protagonist narrating everything. All that stuff that goes back to like the 40s noir, the Maltese Falcon, and all that, where the guy narrates his stuff. It's like the stuff that you see in Sin City, or that they parodied with Spider-Man Noir and Into the Spider-Verse. That's here, and it works sometimes, and sometimes it's a bit ham-fisted. But for the most part, Jackman does fine with it. And he becomes entranced by this femme fatale, this lounge singer. He starts up this affair with her, and there you go. He starts up this relationship with her. They have this fling, and then it cuts instantly to 5 months later. I think 5 months. It cuts forward in time. And it turns out that woman has completely disappeared. Just after their fling has completely vanished, and Nick can't find her at all. And so he uses this nostalgia process, this memory process that on himself in order to remember all of these moments with her. And what they establish early on is that the more time you spend in this tank remembering stuff from your past, the more it affects your brain, and the harder it is to stay in the present. The more you focus on the past, the harder it is to stay in the present and look to the future. It's it's pretty on the nose, but they don't hammer it in the whole time either. It's a very subtle. That's one, it's actually very subtle in that regard, and that's the overarching theme that you could tell, and that's just in the story elements and in the world building that they establish all of this. But I won't give away anything else, because after that point is when it starts getting into essentially. And in fact, one of the characters in the movie used to visit Nick and is now so brain-addled and so incapable of living outside of this one memory she kept revisiting, that she's basically brain damaged because of it. And they come back to her for a couple of scenes to just showcase how addled she is by focusing so much on this one memory. And I'll leave the plot elements out of the rest of the discussion, because that's getting into spoiler territory. Suffice to say that Nick decides to investigate partially using this new this technology, and then the rest of it just going out to places like New Orleans and digging into what exactly this woman May was doing and what exactly he had to do with it, because he's kind of not quite sure how much she really loved him, and trying to figure out what's really going on. And as he goes on, the more and more time he spends in that machine, the more and more it messes with his head. But yeah, I will say the biggest thing going for this movie is the world building. This is written and directed by Lisa Joy, who worked on Pushing Daisies for for your ABC. She's also worked on. She's the co-creator of Westworld for HBO, and she also worked on Burn Notice. So this is somebody who is the brother-in-law to Christopher Nolan, because she married Christopher Nolan's brother Jonathan. Huh. Interesting. So apparently she went to the premiere of Memento way back in the day and met Christopher Nolan's brother Jonathan, and they've been together since then. Married since 2009, have a couple of kids. Good for them. But yeah, she's a co-creator and co-showrunner for Westworld, and this is her first feature-length film debut. And she does a great job building this post-apocalyptic world. Like, the idea, seeing Miami just half underwater and just living always constantly damp and wet, except for all of the dry land further inland, and is so fascinating. And it's the first time I've seen actual climate science, warnings, the things that people have been climate scientists have been warning about for years now, actually shown on screen. Actually shown on a big, on the big screen, in a feature film. This is what's gonna happen if we're not careful, if we don't do something. That we're getting closer and closer to this reality every single day, and yet nobody wants to do anything because that would cost money and not make it. But that's a discussion for another time. As for this movie, she does a good job overall, but I did find the only real issues I had were the noir elements, the narration, and the dialogue. It can be hit or miss. It's not perfect, but it does work overall. That and Nick and May's relationship, the romance element, is actually not all that great. It's not all that. There's not a lot of real chemistry between Rebecca Ferguson and Hugh Jackman ultimately, and during the big moments where you're supposed to feel their passion for each other, there's not a whole lot there. It's actually a bit distant. It's a bit distant in those parts, sadly, but those are really the only parts that I had an issue with, because the actual, the cast in this is fantastic. You've got Hugh Jackman leading it up. You've got Rebecca Ferguson as the femme fatale. Watts is played by Tandy Newton, and she's fantastic as this side character who is, the best friend and, former military buddy, but she's also having this whole arc of, yeah, exactly. If the romance part doesn't exactly work, then don't have the romance part. But I don't know. In any case, Tandy Newton is fantastic, because her character Watts has this overarching, has this character arc of suffering from PTSD from the war. And in doing so, she lost a lot of, she basically gave up on everything and pushed everybody else but Nick away from her, and has been living inside the bottom of a bottle ever since. She's been drinking herself, just enough to not drink herself to death. And that's like an actual line that she says to May in the movie, that Nick pays her just enough to not drink herself to death. And her whole arc is overcoming this trauma that she's dealing with, and hopefully getting back up on her feet. You've also got Cliff Curtis, who is probably best known. He's a good character. He's a great character actor. He's probably best known for. This is a bunch. There's Whale Rider is one of the big ones. He was in that. He's a. What else? Lateral Damage, Training Day. He's been in all kinds of stuff. 10,000 BC, Live Free or Die Hard. He's going to be in the upcoming Avatar movies. He was Fire Lord Ozai in the really bad Shyamalan Last Airbender movie, and was also in the movie The Meg a couple years ago, and was also he's oh god, what is brother? I think he's the brother to he's The Rock's eldest brother. Okay, no problem, Brom. Thanks for dropping in. I love it when people can come in and chit chat. But yeah, Cliff Curtis is fantastic character actor, and he plays one of the main antagonists in this. He's really excellent. And then you've got Daniel Wu, who is best known for Into the Badlands and a couple of other things. He's slowly getting a little more recognition. He's a mix of Hollywood and also mainland Chinese productions. He was in the Tomb Raider movie as well, Geostorm, Warcraft he was in, but yeah, he's really good as the drug kingpin that shows up during the investigation. So yeah, the antagonists in all this are really solid. The cast overall is just good. Good cast in this movie, and they help make up for the fact that a little bit of some of the writing doesn't quite work, but the story is really solid, and the themes, the setting is fantastic, showcasing a lot of the actual climate science on screen in a way that people can visualize, and then the overarching themes of focusing too much on your past will ruin your chances at a future, and that whole aspect of it. It's really good in that regards. And then of course your idea, like, people are never quite how they seem, and that there's always people are so multifaceted you can never quite tell who someone really is unless you dig so much deeper into their life and their who they and their experiences. So yeah, it's definitely going to be like an honorable mention come the end of the year unless it gets pushed out by other movies. But I highly recommend Reminiscence. It's such a solid piece of sci-fi and a decent piece of noir too. Don't get a whole lot of sci-fi noir, but I think this works really well. The last thing I saw on HBO Max, though, was from a few months back, and that is No Sudden Move. And this one's way too small. No Sudden Move is the latest from Steven Soderbergh, who is the director of the Ocean's movies, as well as Haywire and Magic Mike, the first Magic Mike. He mainly does serious, not so much serious, but like he's a very solid director. He is. He's going all the way back to like Sex, Lies, and Videotape. He did Aaron Brockovich as well. Contagion, Logan Lucky. So he's all over the place. He also did that movie Unsane completely on iPhone a couple years back with what's her name from Handmaid's Tale. Oh wait, no, that's not her. He did this with Claire Foy back then. But yeah, he is a really excellent director, and his latest is this period piece crime thriller. And the idea is that these two guys, one Don Cheadle, one Benicio del Toro, are hired to, quote, babysit the family of a car manufacturing executive in order for that executive to get access to this document that's supposed to be of very high value. And these two guys are hired while a third guy is the one taking care of the executive, played by David Harbour. And in the midst of all of this, things go south. The third guy is shot, and so Don Cheadle and Benicio del Toro have to try and figure out what exactly they were hired to do and what this all means. And so it's a big mystery that they're digging through. and it's definitely a well-written movie. I'll give it that. And then the cast is solid. Don Cheadle, Benicio del Toro, David Harbour. You've got Brendan Fraser in this as like their handler. He's excellent. God, I'm so glad Brendan Fraser is back. I've missed him so much. And then you've got let me think. Oh God, who? I mean, the other ones aren't as big of names that I recognized, but everybody in this movie is really solid. Kieran Culkin is the third guy that gets hired, and John Hamm is the lead detective, and then Ray Liotta shows up as a mobster, and it's all really solid acting wise. But I think my biggest issue with this movie is that it's too slow of a burn. I don't mind slow burns, but if you're not leading to something bigger, something more impactful, then otherwise that slow burn just smolders out. I've talked about this before on other stuff, but yeah, the idea that something isn't, your slow burn movie should ultimately lead to something impactful, and the big revelation should be meaningful. This plays things a bit too close to the vest. This is actually a lot more subtle, and it's not all that impactful when the big revelations happen. In fact, the big revelation scene is actually kind of forgettable, even though it has this really solid cameo in there. But suffice to say that Soderbergh, this is a Soderbergh movie. Even at his worst, he's still like a 3 out of 5 at that. But what we got the story. Don Cheadle and Benicio del Toro were great off of each other. David Harbour is great as this nebbish, really stressed out executive whose life is unraveling because of this whole thing. And then the mob stuff is all solid. And then the storytelling isn't the problem. I feel like the pacing and the way things were, things didn't have as much impact as they could have. And then by the end, there's this whole end crawl that reveals what this really meant, because this actually has some some basis in reality and all that. And you never really felt any of that, mainly because it's so inside baseball that unless you knew the history about what they're dealing with, the whole reason for the crime, for the criminal, for the kidnapping and all of this stuff to take part doesn't make any sense. A lot of this feels really heady. It's a very thinking man's movie, so to speak. It's a thinker, but I feel like it didn't really engage me all that much. Not that and I think that's the thing. Soderbergh can do that no problem. Logan Lucky was engaging, as well as Haywire. And then, of course, the Ocean's movie. So, I mean, he's capable of doing these engaging stories, even his more dramatic stuff like Traffic. But what we got here was sadly lacking in that regards. And it was such a, how do I say it? It was such a slow burn that eventually it just fizzled out for me, and I kind of lost interest. And I still recommend it. It's still a movie that I would say check out at least once, because if you're especially into this kind of crime movie and mystery movie, then this would probably be more up your alley than mine. But it was still a solid movie, just never quite hooked me in. But everything else about it was great. From the cast to the writing, most of the dialogue, the filmmaking and all that was all excellent. It was just too slow of a burn for me. And then, but we're gonna end things on an older movie, because people have been talking about this movie in my online circles more and more. And I figured it's time to give this movie its due. No, Nope, that's not the thing I wanted to grab, Streamlabs. That movie is Jennifer's Body. Back in 2009, when this first came out, I reviewed it for my college's paper. And I was very unfavorable towards it. I thought it was garbage. I hated it. I hated Megan Fox, but that's why I'm revisiting it. I admittedly was part of that, nerdy guy coalescence that coalescence of nerdy guys who hated Megan Fox because her character was so meaningless in Transformers, and instead of blaming, Michael Bay, the reason that character exists, all of our hate was directed at Megan Fox, who merely played the character. And so I was deep in Megan Fox head. I thought, I thought she was the kind of character, the kind of character that Michaela was, and that Jennifer was, and I thought that was her. And it's like, holy we were doing the same things with Kristen Stewart at the time for Twilight, and it's like, wow, we just really do not like women, don't we? We just really don't like women and letting them play these terrible roles. God forbid a guy play a terrible role, but no, we have to hate the woman, not the writer or the director for making this terrible character. Oy vey. But thankfully I've grown out of that, and since and in my circles, Jennifer's Body would continue to pop up, especially as a story of burgeoning lesbian love. And so I was like, actually, yeah, that's that makes sense. Yeah, this movie's probably not that bad. I was probably just a stupid dumbass kid when I reviewed it. And lo and behold, I was a stupid dumbass kid when I reviewed it, because watching it now, it's a really solid B-horror comedy. For those who haven't seen it, the premise deals with two teenage girls. You've got Amanda Seyfried, pre-big stuff. Like, this is right after Amanda Seyfried was in... Not too long after Amanda Seyfried was in Mean Girls. And this is right before, I think she broke through with Mamma Mia. I think that was her big breakthrough role. It's around the same time. And then Megan Fox as these two best friends, Anita, Needy, and Jennifer. And Jennifer is the more popular, the more outgoing, the cheerleader trope, and Needy is the nerdier, dorky girl. But even at the beginning of the movie, people are like, y'all are are you two you two are really into each other, and Needy's like, oh no, we're just best friends. We're just best friends, you guys. We're just roommates. Oh my god, they were roommates. But you see early on that Jennifer is a bit of a brat, bit of a snot, but she and Needy have this friendship. Until they go to this indie band concert held at basically a bar, at a local bar, and the band talks about how Jennifer's probably a virgin or whatnot, and talking about it like they're going to take advantage of her, and during the concert, something catches, the place catches fire and burns to the ground. And meanwhile, the band takes Jennifer off who knows where, and she comes back covered in blood and vomiting up black ooze. And it's revealed that the band did something to her, and now she's possessed by a demon. And so the movie has Needy trying to figure out what's going on with Jennifer, while Jennifer is slowly accepting this new part of her, this new her. And as the movie goes on, Jennifer's even more outgoing. She does whatever the hell she wants, doesn't worry about consequences, gives no fucks, while Needy is slowly obsessing over what the hell happened to her best friend, and to the point where she just gives up and is, eventually is just like, you weren't even that great of a friend to begin with. Meanwhile, you've also got Needy's boyfriend, played by young Neil from Scott Pilgrim. You've got Bill Fager back as a cameo as one of the victims' dads. You've got J.K. Simmons in a bad wig as their teacher. You've got Amy Sedaris as Needy's mom. You've got Chris Pratt in a small role as this was before Parks and Rec Chris Pratt. He plays one of the cops in the town. You've got who else was in this? You've got all kinds of small, like, oh my god, I recognize that person. And then the lead singer of the band is Adam Brody, who is a comedian. He's most recently played the super version of Freddy from Shazam. And he's oh god, I forget what he's best known for, but he's in a whole bunch of stuff. Adam Brody or Adam Brady? But yeah, anyway, great collection of people like, oh my god, I recognize you from that other thing, and they're all great. And the one of the undertones is Jennifer is more, is more raunchy, is more outgoing now since she's become possessed, and she pushes boundaries more, and part of that is playing around with the idea that she and Needy are more than just friends, and plays around with the idea of are they into each other like that? Are they more than just friends? And I think it's not as overtly sapphic as other horror, as other gay horror, gay horror movies or anything like that. It doesn't. It plays around with it. It plays around in the space more than anything else. But I think where this movie excels is, number one, the gore. The gore is fantastic. Number two, the cast. Cast is fantastic. Megan Fox plays this character to a T. It's sad that she's basically become known for playing this sort of bimbo character, and she's much more than that. But Jennifer really is such an interesting, multifaceted character once you finally break her down, because she's some parts of her she plays up the stereotype. Other times she's more just an average girl. She's not that stereotypical girl. And now that she has this power, she wants to have fun with it. She wants control over things. She has control more than she ever did. And yeah, I think Megan Fox handles that really well. And Seyfried is fantastic. And the two of them play off each other really well, and are able to really play off this idea of these, fairly opposite, tropey, stereotypical friend people. These the nerd and the cheerleader actually being best friends. It works for the most part until things start to break down once Jennifer is possessed. And I'm trying to think. Oh, and then number three, what works for this movie is the depiction of the small town. What this movie really nails is just how dick all there is to do in a small town. The best things you can do is hopefully go out. The closest thing to a club is a local bar that the townies all go to, and the tragedy of this bar burning down and some people dying becomes like the theme of the whole graduating class that year, because that's the big thing that happened. And then soon that encompasses the murder victims as well. And it really does kind of encapsulate this idea of what it's like to live in a small town in seemingly the middle of nowhere. And yeah, that storytelling aspect of it is really solid. The one thing I ding this movie for, though, is Diablo Cody's dialogue is not all. It can be hit or miss. It's not amazing. Some lines are solid. Some of the dialogue is really spot on. It's natural. It feels realistic. And then a lot of times it's played up so much to the point where it almost comes off as, how do you do, fellow kids? And specifically in this movie, there's a bunch of instances where they incorporate retard into the dialogue. And it's something, it's something tard, something tarded, and it's just like, oh god. I know we used to talk. I know there are groups of teenagers and even young adults that would talk like that, but god damn, did that not age well. That's aged so poorly. So hard to watch. But once again, that part is hit or miss. Everything else, even down to the soundtrack, which is a great mix of metal and indie rock and all of this really solid stuff, all of this, all that kind of sound works excellent in the movie. It's a perfect soundtrack for this kind of horror movie. So yeah, I gave this a really bad shake when it first came out. I was so harsh on this movie and had no reason to be. I had no reason to be that harsh on this movie, and I think it's because it was that era. I was in those circles online that was just the angry nerdy guy hating on the Megan Fox because she's terrible in Transformers, as though that's her fault. And I'm not gonna lie, in college, if I was not careful, I could have ended up as an incel. I fully accept that. Tomska talks similarly about how that's a mentality that's easy to fall into when you're that age. And I was thankfully I had good enough friends around me and a good enough support system that I aged out of that mentality and became more of a well-adjusted adult. But yeah, I gave this movie too bad of a shake when I first watched it, and rewatching it now, I can't help but recommend this movie. It is a solid horror comedy, and even though the lesbian stuff is more like tee-hee, look at us, we're playing in the space, it's not serious, it's still like a nice little almost awakening movie. It's like, oh hey, you can also like girls. How about that? And yeah, I think it really is something, it's earned its cult classics status. I think it in terms of being a cult classic horror movie, it's earned that spot. I would highly recommend people check out Jennifer's Body if they haven't yet. And if they have already, it never hurts to go check it out again. Because yeah, it really, I'm glad I found this poster. This poster is not the official poster, I don't think. It's like this Mondo style poster for it, and I love it. I love the tree branches turning into Megan Fox's face, and the trees in the background turning into the hands that turn into a concert for the band. And then right in front is Amanda Seyfried as Needy. And yeah, it's a really excellent poster composition. The official ones is just ones play up Megan Fox as the sex pot. And I feel like that's also that was also part of the problem. Was her image was that of the sex pot, and she's a lot more chill and down to earth overall. And she got a raw deal from a misogynistic industry. So yeah, Jennifer's Body. Absolutely worth the rewatch. I'm glad I went back and revisited it because it held up way better than I thought it would at the time. If I could go back and tell my 20 something year old self, like, hey, shithead, this is a good movie. Quit being a little incel. Rewatch this movie, you dumbass. It's good. But yeah, Jennifer's Body, excellent movie. Definitely worth checking out if you haven't, and definitely and never hurts to rewatch if you get the chance. But I think that's gonna do it. We're pushing. It's been an hour. That's usually how long these streams go, and it's guerrilla style. I just wanted to get these reviews out into the ether, and then I can worry about hopefully setting up. Let's head back to the library for this one. Hopefully setting up an actual schedule for once, and I'm hoping to actually have a set schedule for people to come watch me stream, because that's the only way this is going to get better. I can't just keep guerrilla streaming it the whole time, because I initially planned to do my stream back at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Then it was going to be 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and now it's almost midnight. So yeah, I need to give myself a schedule and stick to it. Otherwise, this isn't going to go anywhere. But thank you for watching. And I'm not going to worry about rating anybody this late at night. I'm just going to go to bed and let my voice rest. And then hopefully come back on Friday with some more with a new thing, new story to tell. I'm going to tell a new story, and it's going to be very apropos given some recent releases, but we'll get into that on Friday, and I'll tease it a bit more. Suffice to say that thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you all later. Thanks for stopping by the library. Peace.